June 28th, 1906. Dear John, remember that the only real happiness comes from giving. There is no other way to be happy, my son. Be generous, be magnanimous, be kind and considerate to others, and you will find that in the end, it is you who are enriched and rewarded. I cannot stress enough the importance of generosity and kindness. These virtues have not only brought me immense joy and fulfillment, but have also shaped the very core of who I am. In a world that often prioritizes personal gain and self-interest, it is easy to lose sight of the profound impact we have on the lives of others. However, I ask you to resist such temptations and instead embrace the path of giving. True happiness lies in the accumulation of wealth. True happiness lies not in the accumulation of wealth or possessions, but in the ability to make a positive difference in the lives of those around us. My son, generosity is not limited to monetary wealth alone. It extends far beyond material possessions. I ask you to give of your time, your knowledge, and your compassion. Extend a helping hand to those in need, for it is through such acts of kindness that we truly become rich in spirit. But remember, my son, that generosity must be accompanied by discernment. It is important to be aware of those who may seek to take advantage of your goodwill. Choose your philanthropic endeavors wisely, ensuring that they align with your values and have a meaningful impact. Seek out organizations and causes that are dedicated to uplifting others and promoting long-term positive change. In the pursuit of generosity, you will inevitably face challenges and setbacks. Some may question your motives or criticize your actions. I ask you not to be discouraged, for it is often in the face of adversity that our character is truly tested. Stay true to your convictions and let the goodness within you shine through in all that you do. My son, as you embark on your own journey through life, I ask you to remember that true happiness is not found in selfish pursuits, but in selfless acts of giving. Embrace generosity as a way of being and allow it to shape your interactions with others. In doing so, you will forge deep and meaningful connections, and your own life will be enriched beyond measure. May you continue to walk the path of kindness, compassion, and generosity, my beloved son. Carry forward the legacy of our family and let the world bear witness to the profound impact that one individual can make when they choose to give selflessly. Love, your father. That is a letter that John D. Rockefeller wrote to his son John, and this is a book called The 38 Letters from J.D. Rockefeller to His Son, Perspectives, Ideology, and Wisdom by John D. Rockefeller. The interesting thing about this book is that it was not written to be published. These are 38 personal letters to his son. And the first that I heard of it was a Founders Podcast episode on it, and I listened to that podcast probably 5 or 6 times in the last few months. To me, the advice that a man gives to his son is highly indicative of the advice that he wishes or hopes that he lives by as well. I think that he hopes the world lives by, because that's your son, that's your offspring. Obviously, it's going to be very important to relay the most important values, principles, tricks, tips, habits, advice that you possibly can to your son. That's part of why I read this and why I'm doing this podcast. The second reason is John D. Rockefeller is one of the, if not the most wealthy individual to ever live on earth. One of them. At least. I think the last number I saw, he would be worth like $400+ billion in today's money. That's what I heard, at least, or that's what I've seen. He is extremely nuanced. People have a lot of differing opinions on John D. Rockefeller. There is some people that hate him, some people that love him, some people that think he's like the bane of everyone's existence. Some people think that he's like a evil capitalist. The reason I decided to read that last letter first is it provides nuance for him as a person, because he is probably the most capitalistic person that's ever lived, made billions and billions of dollars, was utterly ruthless in his business dealings. Ruthless. And we'll get into a lot of these. I mean, he was literally, he perceived himself as a conqueror. But then you hear him saying, son, there is literally no other way to be happy than by giving. And one thing that you'll learn about him is that he genuinely believed with every fiber of his being that God put him on the earth to make as much money as he could so that he could give it away. He truly believed that. He believed that that was his calling and his purpose. So I just find it very nuanced. Obviously, there's some things about him that I don't like and that I wish that he didn't do in terms of some of his business dealings, some of the things that he started and was a part of. That said, I think we'd be foolish to not learn, or at least attempt to learn, from a guy like Johnny Rockefeller that was so utterly successful in business, had a marriage that lasted a long time, lived to be 96 years old, I believe, had, by all accounts, a very interesting and a life worth exploring and learning about. So, all that said, this is called 38 Letters from J.D. Rockefeller to his son. Let's get into some of the highlights. I've got a good amount of highlights, as you can see. Let's get into it. This note says equality. This is a core thing for him. The founding belief of the United States of America is that all human beings are created equal. But this equality is only present in the context of rights and laws. It has nothing to do with economic and cultural advantages. Think of our world as a high mountain. When your parents live on the peak of the mountain, you are destined not to live at the foot of the mountain. Likewise, when our parents live at the foot of the mountain, you are destined to not live on the peak of the mountain. In most cases, the status of parents will determine the starting point of their child's life. But this does not mean that everyone has a different starting point in life outcomes. In this world, there is never a saying of inheriting wealth or poverty. Same goes to inheriting success or failure. The only truth is that as long as you work hard enough, you will succeed. I firmly believe that our destiny is determined by our actions, not by our origins. Bam. Right out of the gate, pretty indicative of who he is. He was born in a very odd childhood. His dad was a bigamist. His dad was like a con man. Bigamist means multiple families. So he would like come, leave. He was a swindler. So he'd make money and then he'd give Johnny Rockefeller and his mom a bunch of money and then he'd leave. And he did teach Johnny Rockefeller a lot of things about business, which is good, which is obviously important. But he was an odd guy. So Johnny Rockefeller very much so had a unique upbringing. He was not wealthy by any means. That's what I think he means. I firmly believe that our destiny is determined by our actions, not by our origins. Look, some of these people, some of you that are listening to this, very wealthy, could have very wealthy parents. Some of you that are listening to this could have not wealthy parents at all, could have grown up in a impoverished or lower income household. Everybody's starting point is different. That's why I highlighted this. Is I agree with him. I think that our destiny is determined by our actions, not our origins. There is endless examples of human beings that reached, quote, the peak or the top after starting at the bottom. There are also endless examples of human beings starting at the top and ending at the bottom. There are also many examples of people starting in the middle or the top or near the top and then going higher as well. So it's not cut and dry. It's not if you're born poor, you're going to stay poor. It's not if you're born poor, you're going to end rich. It's not if you start rich, you're going to end up poor, be a piece of shit. It's not necessarily that if you start as the child of very wealthy parents and have different or unique advantages or privileges as a child that you're going to end up being a piece of crap because you didn't work for any of that. There's Teddy Roosevelt, who we did last week, is a prime example of that. He was born extremely wealthy and obviously lived a very important, impactful, and influential life. So, next note. This is on the same page. It's also on equality of opportunities. John, opportunities will always be unequal, but the results prove otherwise. In history, whether in politics or business, especially in businesses, there has been many examples of successful people who started from scratch. They have had only a few opportunities because of poverty, but they eventually achieved fame because of their past struggles. However, history has also been filled with examples of rich children who were privileged but have failed in life. According to a study that was conducted in Massachusetts on 17 wealthy people, it was revealed that none of their children left the world wealthy. 17 is obviously a small number, but worth noting. A long time ago, there was a story in society that satirized the incompetence of rich children. It mentioned that in a small bar in Philadelphia, a guest was talking about a millionaire when he said, "He is a self-made millionaire." "Yeah?" A smarter man next to him replied. "He inherited $20 million, but now he is only left with $1 million. This is a distressing story. So he started with 20 million and now he's a self-made millionaire because he only has one. That's the joke. This is a distressing story, but in our society today, the rich children are caught between advancing and retreating. Many of them are destined to be sympathetic and pitiful and even go to hell. That's another note, interjection. He was extremely religious. A lot of important things in his life came from his view of religion and spiritual guidance or purposes or whatever you will. The glory and success of the family cannot guarantee the future of its children and grandchildren. I admit that the early advantage is really helpful, but it does not guarantee them a victory in the end. I have thought about this distressing problem for rich children more than once. I feel that once rich children begin taking advantage of their family success, they will have little opportunity to learn and develop the skills needed for survival. People of poorer backgrounds will actively develop their creativity, abilities, while also cherishing and seizing various opportunities because they urgently need to rescue themselves. I have also observed that the kind of ambition that the rich children have often lacks the motivation and attributes of the poor. Hence, they resort to praying for their own success. Therefore, when you and your sisters were very young, I deliberately concealed the fact that I was well off. I instilled many values such as frugality and personal struggle in you because I know that the quickest way to harm someone is to give them money. It can make people corrupt, depraved, arrogant, and cause them to lose their source of happiness. The reason I just laughed, there's a story of his son, John, I believe, who he wrote this. I believe that's who it was. He was writing this letter to. When he was like 8 years old, John D. Rockefeller was already one of the richest people in the world, and he made his son wear hand-me-down dresses from his older sisters because he didn't want to buy him dresses or he wanted to instill frugality. That's a pretty funny indication of like how sincerely and seriously he took this principle. But all that to say, I think that's really important. I mean, it's very nuanced, it varies greatly, the outcome of different inputs. So to me, it's just inspiring because I really align. I'll go back. I firmly believe that our destiny is determined by our actions and our origins. Doesn't matter where we're from. Doesn't matter how we were raised. If we work hard, we will be successful. I think that's really, really potent. I also like his last point about people from poor backgrounds will actively develop their creativity and abilities. For people that were not born in very poor backgrounds, I think this is, I was not born in a very poor background, but one thing that I take from this is how can I put my back up against the wall? How can I create that urgency? How can I instill that urgency in myself that he's talking about poor people being born with? It's an advantage if you look at it in that way, but I think there's a lot of people listening that could really benefit from the idea of how can we instill this urgency or put our back up against the wall. Something to note. Okay, this note says character and wealth. John, every move of yours will be of concern to me. However, as compared to being concerned, I am more confident in you, and I believe in your excellent character, a character that is more valuable than any wealth in the world. That will help you pave a good future and lead a successful and fulfilling life. That's another good lesson. It's not all about money. John D. Rockefeller, one of the richest people ever in the entire world, was telling his son that apart from your material success, your character is what I'm most confident in, how you actually show up as a man in your life. How honest are you? How integral are you? How do you speak to people? How do you treat people? That is what gives me the most confidence about you and the success and fulfillment of your life and your future. Very important for me. I think that's extremely, because there's a verse in Matthew, I believe, for what does it benefit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? You know, like it doesn't matter how much money you have if you're a piece of shit, frankly. So that's John D. Rockefeller would agree with that. Let's see. Luck and destiny. Okay. Oh, here we go. This is in another letter. In the eyes of ordinary people, luck is always innate. As long as they find out someone has attained success or have been promoted, they will say casually with contempt, "This man's luck is so good. It is luck that helped him." Such a person can never have a peek into the truth that makes one successful. Everyone is a designer and architect of his own destiny. Bam. That's good stuff. John D. Rockefeller has a very simple way of writing, but it's very powerful. It's a very, I risk almost sounding like ironically overcomplicated, but it's a very poignant way of writing. It's profound, but it's very simple. He didn't use a lot of big words, which reminds me of I think Caesar said this: avoid complex words like a ship avoids a reef. Because I find myself doing this, and if you listen to the podcast, maybe you've heard me use some big words in the past. But there's a special simplicity and power in very simple writing, and John D. Rockefeller certainly has that. That's an example. Everyone is a designer and architect of his own destiny. There you go. He has some interesting perspectives on luck. I don't think we'll get into him in this specific podcast, but he thinks luck essentially is you plan your own luck by working hard, preparation, things of that sort. Okay, here's another note. This says conquest. I mentioned he thinks himself a conqueror. Mentions it over and over and over again. Visionary businessmen are always good at finding opportunities in every disaster, and that's how I did it. Before we started our journey of conquest, the oil industry was in chaos and there was no hope at all. 90% of the refiners in Cleveland had been crushed by the increasingly fierce competition. If they did not sell the factory, they can only watch themselves go extinct. This was the best time to acquire an opponent. Ruthless, I'm telling you, this guy was ruthless. It seems unethical to take an acquisition at times like these, but it really has nothing to do with conscience. An enterprise is like a battlefield, and the purpose of strategic goals is to create the most beneficial state for oneself. For strategic considerations, the first target I chose to conquer was not a small company that was vulnerable, but the strongest opponent, Clark Payne. This company was well known in Cleveland and were ambitious as they wanted to acquire my Star oil refinery. But before the opponent decides, I will have to strike first to gain the upper hand. So, Teddy, my note on the page was same as TR, Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt, Johnny Rockefeller, their lives intertwined a lot. And there's actually a very funny letter that we'll get into at the end of this where John D. Rockefeller expresses some, let's say, less than favorable opinions of Teddy. So it's just interesting. But that note, Teddy Roosevelt would find the biggest opponent. He wouldn't go for the weakest one and then try to take that. He would, where's the biggest guy? I want to go fight him. Where's the person with the most potential energy? I'm going to go find that person and conquer that person. John D. Rockefeller was much the same. Anything can happen in this world, but nothing can happen without doing anything. Reap without sowing, in parentheses. Those who blindly follow the crowds and rules, I view them with disdain. Those who blindly follow the crowd and rules, I view them with disdain. He literally hated them. Disdain. He disdained these people who blindly followed the rules, who were sheepish. I think that's extremely powerful. It's a meme more or less nowadays about like sheep and following the crowd and all these things with different things going on politically and economically and with the whole COVID thing. But I view them with disdain. Interesting. John, for our good luck to continue, we must carefully plan our luck, and planning luck requires a good plan. A good plan must be a good design, and a good design must be able to play a role. You need to know that when designing a good design, you must first consider two basic prerequisites. The first condition is to know your goals, such as what you want to do, or even what kind of person you want to become. The second condition is knowing what resources you have, such as status, money, interpersonal relationships, and even abilities. The note I put here is reaps in one season because he was industrious in the last. So I think that's really, really important. And I mean, here he is, once again, the most successful businessman probably ever in American history, maybe of the world, telling us how to come up with a plan. First is to know your goals. What do you want to do? What do we want to do? What do we want to accomplish? Where do we want to go? We have to know those things. The second is knowing what resources you have, such as status, money, and interpersonal relationships. He then goes on to say that these things are interchangeable. Like if you can start with what you have and then choose your goal from what you have, or you can start from a goal and then use what you have. They're interchangeable, but those are the two components that the most successful American businessmen of all time said you need for a good plan. To know where you're going and to know what resources you have now, because to achieve that goal, you have to use what you have now. If you don't do that, then you'll never start because you'll never have the right resources. He's a very interesting writer. I highly recommend y'all get this book. It was very easy to read. You can read 1 letter a day, 2 letters a day. It's very, very easy. I'll have this sitting around all the time and just picking it up. Let's see. This is okay. This is a long one. Yeah, so this is a long note. I mean, there's a lot of notes here. I am proud to say that I have never tasted unemployment. This is not my luck because I never treat work as hard labor without fun. Instead, I found infinite happiness from work. I think that work is a privilege, and as it brings more than just sustaining life. Work is the foundation of all businesses, the source of prosperity, and the shaper of genius. Work makes young people work harder and do more than their parents, no matter how rich they are. Work is expressed in the humblest forms and lays the foundations for happiness. A job helps to add flavor to life, but people must love work before it can return the biggest favors and achieve the greatest results. Proverbs 14:23. Pretty sure that's the verse that says, that's the note that I put in on the page. Mere talk leads to poverty. Only hard work leads to profit. Something like that. So very much so aligned. Also, interjecting, there's still a little bit more in this letter, but John D. Rockefeller had a very interesting perception of the Bible. There's a story in here where somebody questioned his monetary wealth, and he basically reframed this guy's understanding of a biblical principle. So we'll get into that hopefully later. So a job helps to add flavor to life, but people must love work before it can return the biggest favors and achieve the greatest results. When I first entered the business world, I often heard that a person who wants to climb to the peak needs to make a lot of sacrifices. However, as the years passed, I began to understand that many people who were climbing to the peak were not paying the price. They work hard because they really like work. People who climb up in any industry are fully committed to what they're doing and are dedicated. Sincerely love the work you do, you will naturally succeed. Love what you do, pursue your interests is the note that I read. Loving work is a belief. With this faith, we can heave the desperate mountain into a rock of hope. A great painter said it well. Pain will eventually pass, but beauty will last forever. Bam. That's awesome. Very good. Love what you do, pursue your interests. I wrote that because he also speaks later on about how to choose what you're doing, or how to choose your career, or what to do as an employer and employee, and he speaks about that. But continued. But some people are obviously not smart enough. They have ambitions but are too picky about their work. They are always looking for a perfect employer or job. The fact is that employers need punctual, honest, and hardworking employees. They only leave the salary increase and promotion opportunities to those employees who work hard and are very loyal, extra zealous, and spend more time doing things. Because they are running a business, not a charity. They need those who are more valuable. Provide value, provide value, provide value, provide value. That is what he preached and preached. It's what Sam Walton preaches. It's what Jeff Bezos preaches. It's what all these famous entrepreneurs preached. How do you provide value? Figure that out and then provide the value, and you will be rewarded. It's a natural law. It's a universal law. You are rewarded based on the value that you provide. Very simple. No matter how great a person's ambitions are, he must at least begin before he can reach the peak. Once started, it is not difficult to progress. The more difficult or unpleasant the work is, the more urgent it is to accomplish it. The longer he waits, the more difficult and scarier it becomes. This is a bit like shooting a gun. The longer you aim, the lower the chance of you pulling the trigger. My note here is a lesson that I was taught in college when our baseball team had a performance coach come in. He would always say this: it's the start that stops most people. It's the start that stops most people. I'm also reminded of a Mark Twain quote that said, if you have to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. If you have to eat 2 frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. I was reminded of that by the more difficult or unpleasant the work is, the more urgent it is to accomplish it. If you have to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. If you have to eat 2 frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. But it's the start that stops most people. And he even says this is a bit like shooting a gun. The longer you aim, the lower your chance of pulling the trigger. Matthew McConaughey says this. He says, sometimes you have to ready, fire, aim. You have to freaking pull the trigger and start. You have to go. And I love that. One thing that we'll also realize as we go through this book is that Johnny Rockefeller was action-oriented to a T. He prioritized thinking. He gave himself space to think. But he was ruthless in his execution and his action. True. It was... He has a famous paradigm or aphorism. Action solves everything. Action solves everything. Action solves everything. He would say this all the time. You cannot get anywhere without action. So very important. Here's another one. So this is December 24th, so Christmas Eve, 1897. Dear John, I always clearly remember the words of intelligent people. A wise man said it well. Education covers many aspects, but it does not teach you anything. The wise man showed us a truth. If you do not take action, even the world's most practical, beautiful, and viable philosophy will not work. Take action. I have always believed that an opportunity comes from another opportunity, as even the best ideas have flaws. Even if it is a very ordinary plan, if it is actually implemented and developed, it will be much better than a good plan that is abandoned halfway, because the former will be carried out consistently, but the latter has already been given up. You have to start, and this reminds me of another quote, whatever that I've heard before. Sometimes making the decision and committing to it is more important than the decision itself. I think John D. Rockefeller would agree with that, because there's no such thing as a perfect plan. I'm also reminded now of General Patton, famous military general in World War II, led the an armored division, I believe, in America, and was instrumental in the Battle of the Bulge, I believe, which was hugely important for the Allies in Europe. He said, a good plan executed today with violence is better than a perfect plan executed tomorrow or next week. Something like that. So basically, a good plan executed today is better than a perfect plan next week. Have to take action. We have to start now. This is a recurring theme throughout John D. Rockefeller's life. Let's see. If you look at the ordinary people, you will find that they are all living passively. They always say much more than they do, or even do nothing. Positive action is another positive attribute of mine. I never like to talk in vain, because I know that there is no result without action, and there is nothing in the world that is obtained just from thinking. Positive action is another positive attribute of mine. I never like to talk in vain. This is something, I realize that I'm literally sitting here in front of a microphone and a camera talking. So I understand the irony of that, but the important lesson here is that it's much more important to act than to talk. The one thing that we could probably apply for our lives here is like the idea of mental masturbation, of setting a goal and just telling a bunch of people about it, saying, oh yeah, look, I have this goal, I'm going to do this, here's what I'm going to do. And you tell your friends, you tell your family, you tell your acquaintances, whatever, or yeah, I'm going to stop doing this, or I'm going to become this, etc. He was more of a fan of just fucking doing it. Just go. Just stop talking about it and just do that. Just become the person that you want to become. Don't tell people about it. When you tell people about things, a lot of times, I'm not saying don't speak about anything, but I've found that you open yourself up to their opinions, which shows a little bit of lack of belief in yourself, because, hey, look, friend, this is what I'm planning on doing. They have some apprehension, and then that starts to, why would you open yourself up to that? If you had a strong belief in the first place, just send it. You have to start and then continue to execute. And this is funny because on this page, I literally have action or act written like 6 times. What is even more frustrating is that even if there is knowledge and wisdom but no action, everything is still empty talk. We cannot fall into the trap of continuous deliberation and planning. But we must recognize the reality. No matter how detailed the plan is, we still cannot accurately predict the final outcome. Of course, I do not deny that planning is very important. It is the first step to achieve favorable results. But planning is not and cannot replace action. Action solves everything. That's where I got that from. Action solves everything. But because of one's inner fear, the fear of the unknown, many people resist change. Even if the status quo does not satisfy them, he dares not take a step forward. This is what he means by the people who blindly follow rules and whatever. He disdains these people. Disdains. He hates them. Not hates, but maybe, I don't know. I didn't talk to him about it, but he disdains them. He said that himself. If the status quo does not satisfy him, he dares not take a step forward. And he's saying that because he's afraid of the unknown. We have to basically learn how to just say, screw that, and walk into the dark, That's the reality of it. For me, a funny anecdote I'm thinking about is when I was like a little kid, my older brother, we'd have to go feed the dogs in our backyard. It'd be pitch black, and he would, I didn't like feeding the dogs by myself when I was a younger kid, I guess. But he would sometimes go out there with me and then literally yell for burglars to come kidnap me. And so I would just sprint through the dark to our dog kennel, feed the dogs, and then run back. But there's perhaps some comedy, but there's actually a lesson there, because I never got kidnapped, and the sooner I actually went and fed the dogs, the sooner my fear was overcome. Let's see. Yeah, he talks about passivity a lot, like people being passive, and he does not like those people. To the book, many people make themselves into a passive person. They want to wait until all conditions are perfect, that is, when the time is right, before taking action. Life is an opportunity at a time, but there is almost nothing perfect. Those passive people have a mediocre life precisely because they must wait for everything to be 100% profitable and perfectly safe before doing something. This is a fool's approach. We must compromise in life and believe that what is in hand is the opportunity we need now, so that we can keep ourselves out of the quagmire of waiting forever before falling into action. Once again, the start that stops most people. We have to act. The plan does not need to be perfect. We have to act. We have to act. Okay, here's another one. Everyone has a time when they lose confidence and doubts their abilities, especially in adversity. I wrote TR, Churchill, Lincoln, etc. John D. Rockefeller was no exception. Every single great man, Teddy Roosevelt, John D. Rockefeller, Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln, etc., Napoleon, had bouts of self-doubt and depression. That's not an indication of like a lesser man or like lower willpower or a weak man. Literally, these are some of the most incredibly impactful and formidable human beings that have ever lived. And they dealt with that. The problem is they just didn't let it fester. They just said, okay, yeah, whatever, I'm moving onward. It doesn't matter. They're moving resolutely forward. He goes on to say, however, passive people do not regard failure as an opportunity for learning and growth, as they are always admonishing themselves. Perhaps I really can't do this, so that is why I have lost my eagerness to participate in future activities. It's not what I wrote is it's not humility, it's weakness. A lot of people will disguise weakness or fear as humility. Oh, I'm being humble. I can't do that. I'm being humble. That's actually weakness, and it's a lack of faith, in my opinion. I think it's a lack of faith in yourself and of God. These people that I've read about thus far and that I'm learning about are utterly. How would I say it? Their belief in themselves is ridiculously high. They like I said, they have doubts, they have confidence, but they don't let that fester. They don't ruminate on that thought. They say, oh, like this doubt, they acknowledge it and they change. Oh wait, yeah, I can do this. Oh yeah, I can figure this out. Oh yeah, I have God on my side. I can do X, Y, and Z. I can accomplish these things. They don't ruminate on this sort of passivity and admonishing themselves. They don't self-deprecate. They don't do that. And that's a really important lesson, because I think a lot of us do that. I think a lot of us disguise humility. It's okay to freaking believe in yourself. It's okay to believe that you are capable of incredible things. I think that's the case, at least. Let's see. Another note. This says, disturb. Okay. The real basis people use to judge your ability is not how much you have in your head, but your actions. People trust down-to-earth people, and they will think. This person dares to say and do, he must know what the best course of action is. I haven't heard anyone being praised for not disturbing others, not acting, or having to wait for someone else to order things. So, this reminds me of an idea. I can't remember who said this to me. If you're listening, let me know and I'll give you credit. But somebody said one time, I was like, well, I don't want to, I was talking about reaching out to people, or maybe it's for the podcast. Like, hey, I don't want to reach out multiple times to people. I don't want to annoy them. I don't want to pester them is the word that I used. And whoever I was speaking to said, well, if you're going to be successful, at some point, you're going to have to pester somebody. And that was a big paradigm shift for me. At some point, you're going to have to disturb somebody. At some point, you're going to have to risk being disliked by one person because you annoy them or whatever, to get to the opportunity of somebody saying yes, or getting the connection that you need to make that next leap in your life. So that's just an important lesson for me. Is like, obviously there's nuance. You don't want to be excessively annoying. You don't want to disturb people or burn bridges, but ask the question, reach out. Steve Jobs would just call people in the phone book and ask them questions. And he said something like, very rarely, if ever, has he ever picked up the phone and asked a question and somebody said no or somebody not answered. I've learned that through the podcast. People are a lot easier to get in touch with, especially if you have like an inkling of value or genuine curiosity in you. People like helping people. Successful men like helping younger men who are earnest in their pursuit, who are genuine, and who are disciplined, and genuinely curious. That's what I found to be true in my life through the podcast, without question. Okay. This says war. First, I'm going to have a drink of coffee. Hold up. Okay, war. It's an inside joke. Before I get into it, it's an inside joke with a lot of my friends that like I reference war, and honestly a lot of us do, but Rockefeller literally viewed this as a war, and you're about to see why. To the book. An excellent commander will not attack a bunker that has nothing to do with him, but will try his best to destroy the bunker that is strong enough to destroy the city. John, every crucial competition is a battle that determines fate. Retreat means surrender. Retreat will turn you into a slave. The war is inevitable. Let it come. In this world, competition will not stop for a moment, and we will have no time to rest. All we can do is bring a steel-like determination to face all lands of challenges and competitions, and we must be in high spirits and happy, otherwise it will not produce good results. War is inevitable. Let it come. Bam. Life is tough. I was talking to my buddy Brad Womack on my most recent conversation podcast last week, and he said something like, we were speaking about this idea about like life being not rainbows and sunshine, and it will come at you fast. Life will come at you fast. John D. Rockefeller encourages us and his son to bring a steel-like determination to face all the lands of challenges and be happy that you have them, because that's what life is. Thank God for the strength to be able to persevere through those as well. Okay, this one says risk, which is very important. Johnny Rockefeller was extremely risk tolerant, which is another really interesting commonality between a lot of successful people that I'm realizing. They had so much faith and belief in themselves and in God that they were going to figure it out, so they were willing to take risks that other people would not have taken. Okay, son, what is presented to us is often a great opportunity to solve tricky problems ingeniously. Son, what is presented to us is often a great opportunity to solve tricky problems ingeniously. Borrowing money is not a bad thing. It won't make you bankrupt as long as you don't treat it like a life buoy when you only use it in times of crisis, but instead treat it as a powerful tool you can use to create opportunities. Otherwise, you will fall into the quagmire of fear and failure. Yeah, so this is all about leverage. It's just about finding a tool and then using it as leverage. When you use a lever, there's a risk, but there's also massive upside. Among the wealthy people I know or are acquainted with, there are very few people who rely on accumulating small bits of wealth day by day to eventually become who they are now. More people make money by borrowing money. The reason is not esoteric, which means little known or known by few. Buying and selling $1 profit each is far less profitable than buying and selling $100. So the note I wrote is 9 to 5 and risk. What he's saying there is basically very few of the wealthy people that he knows or is acquainted with are wealthy by being employees and not taking risk, by accumulating small bits of wealth over a long period of time. He said, more people make money by borrowing money, which basically means acquiring risk. Acquiring risk could be starting a business, could actually be borrowing money to buy real estate, borrowing money to start a company, to build a product, whatever it is. But he's basically saying that very few people that he knew or acquainted with that were very wealthy were wealthy by acquiring small bits of wealth throughout a long period of time. They all, for lack of a better term, were founders or excessively high, not excessive, but were very large risk takers. They did not fear risk. Son, whether it is to win wealth or to win in life, what good people think about in competition is not that they will lose, but what they should do to become a winner. So it's not focusing on, what if we lose? What will I lose if this risk doesn't happen? It's who do I need to become for this to win? They're not even focusing on the loss, which is super important. Son, life is a constant mortgage. We mortgage our youth for the future and mortgage our lives for happiness. Because if you dare not approach the bottom line, you lose. Wouldn't it be worthwhile to take the risk to attain success? When it comes to mortgages, I want to tell you that when I received a huge sum of money from a banker, not only was my business mortgage, but also my honesty. I regard contracts as sacred things. I strictly abide by the contracts and never default on debts. I never forget to treat investors, bankers, customers, including competitors, with sincerity. When discussing issues with them, I always insist on telling the truth, never making things up or speaking ambiguously, as I firmly believe that lies will always eventually surface. Jordan Peterson says something like he's never seen somebody lie and get away with it. Over time, lies come to the surface. They come to fruition. It's just better to tell the truth. It's better to be forthright. It's better to let people understand where you stand on things so that they do not have to guess. The reason that I think that we don't do that is because we risk being disliked, or we risk coming across as crass or rude or whatever. I think that's a fallacy. I think that people actually respect is better than popularity. Popularity, if you want to be popular, you can lie to people. If you want to be respected, you tell people the truth. And people genuinely are more fond of people that they respect than popular people over the long term. So, son, honesty is a method and a strategy. Because I paid with my own honesty, I have won the trust of bankers and more people. And because of it, I survived numerous difficult times and embarked on an expressway to success. Tell the truth. Bam. Okay. This note says failure. When I first stepped into the business world and prayed to God to bless our new company, a catastrophic storm hit us. At that time, we signed a contract to buy a large amount of beans and were prepared to make a lot of money. But we did not expect that a sudden visit from the frost would come and crush our sweet dreams. Half of the beans we got were destroyed, and some unscrupulous suppliers also added sand, small beans, and straw. This business was destined to fail, but I know that I cannot be depressed, let alone be immersed in failure. Otherwise, I will drift further away from my goals and dreams. So there he is. He's acknowledging the fact that, oh, wow, this thing happened. It's not a good thing. It's a negative. It has the potential to jeopardize my entire business. But I know that it could make me depressed, but I cannot become depressed. I'm not going to let it do that. There's no free lunch in this world, and it is even more impossible to maintain the status quo. If you may still, you will regress. If you stay still, you will regress. But to move forward, you must be willing to make decisions and take risks. There is always a solution. Very important. As a result, courage and diligence saves us. Courage and diligence saved us. Everyone hates failure. However, once avoiding failure becomes your motivation for doing things, you embark on a path of laziness and powerlessness. This is terrible, especially for such a disaster. Fear of failure is not a good motivator, is the note that I wrote. Everyone hates failure. However, once you avoid failure, avoiding failure becomes your motivation for doing things, you embark on a path of laziness and powerlessness. This manifests in life, I believe, pardon me, by not doing things, inaction. If I don't take action, then I don't have to risk failure. It's that simple. If I don't ask that girl on a date or whatever, I don't have to fear rejection. If I don't knock on that door to sell solar or pest control or whatever it is, I don't have to risk failure. If I don't cold call that guy to sell my offer, my service, or my product, I don't have to put myself up to the possibility of being denied, told no, rejected, whatever. The opportunities are literally limitless. If that becomes your motivation or our motivation, we will slip into a path of laziness and powerlessness. So the opposite of that is saying, basically, F it, we ball. We're just going to make the calls. We're going to ask the girl out. We're going to ask people to come on the podcast. We're going to sell our product. We're going to promote what we're doing and have belief and faith that what we're doing benefits people. I guess that's a little caveat. If you actually don't believe your product's good or that you're not harming people or that you're not helping people, then I think you have some digging to do. I think that in the end, you will sacrifice your soul if you continue to do that. I know some people that I believe, I know of some people who I believe do that. I don't think they could genuinely look in the mirror and say that they're helping people, but they're monetarily rewarded for it. And I think that's a slow journey to hell, in my opinion. I have no interest in that. I actually think that's a pretty bad way to go about life. And I think that John D. Rockefeller would agree. Okay. The note I have on this page, I won't read this whole letter because it's pretty long, but never declare spiritual or mental bankruptcy is something that he said. I love that. Never declare spiritual or mental bankruptcy. Son, if you declare spiritual mental bankruptcy, you will lose everything. You need to know that the career path is like a wave. If you step on the wave, the merits will follow. And if you make a mistake, you will be trapped in the shallows and sorrow for the rest of your life. Failure is a learning experience. You can either turn it into a tombstone or a stepping stone. There is no success without challenges. Do not stop because of failure and overcome yourself. You are the biggest winner. I have great faith in you. Love, your father. One thing that's interesting to note is he didn't use a lot of exclamation points. So when he does, you can tell he's being serious. And when he says, you are the biggest winner to his son, he uses an exclamation point, which I find to be funny, but also important because it actually means something. It means a lot more than just adding an exclamation point at the end of every text. There is no success without challenges. Failure is a learning experience. You can either turn it into a tombstone or a stepping stone. That's so well written. It's so simple, but it's so powerful. Failure can either become the death of you or it can become the fuel that projects you and propels you to the life that you want to live. How incredible. Okay, so this one says faith. I mean, I got to tell you, the amount of notes that I have for this book, it's only like 190 pages. I cannot recommend that you get this book enough. It's cheap. It's very quick. It's only, I would say, probably like a couple day read if you went right through it, but it's also, you could just read one letter a day and you're getting direct access. Like, he literally wrote these words. You're getting direct access into the mind of the most successful American businessman that's ever lived. Think about that. We would be fools to not like take stock in this. I can't encourage you enough. There will be a link below to buy the book too, if you want. Let's see. This says some win, some lose. Okay, yeah, this is funny. This is 1918. I think he's almost like 80 years old or something like that here. It just kind of shows his competitive spirit, and I just thought it was a funny story. Today, on my way to play golf, I encountered a challenge that I have not met in a long time. A young man arrogant overtook my car in his fashionable Chevrolet. He provoked this old man's competitive nature, and in the end, he could only look at the back of my car. This made me very happy, just like when I defeated my opponent in business. It's pretty funny. In fact, I do not like money. What I like is making money. What I like is the good feeling of victory. So this is another thing. We'll talk about this later in the interpretation of the Bible, but he didn't per se love money, or at least he didn't espouse to love money. He loved the process of competition in business. Of course, the feeling when others lose sometimes touches my compassion, but doing business is a harsh competition. There is nothing more ruthless than the determination to force others out. But you can only avoid the tragic fate of defeat by finding ways to defeat your opponent. This is the case when there is competition. The note I wrote is some will win, someone will lose. It's really just a matter of what side do we want to be on? Do we want to be the winner or the loser? It's not really a matter of conscience. There's definitely an ethical and conscientious way of operating and doing business. But if you're telling the truth and you're competing honestly, then someone's going to lose. Like, that's the reality of it. And unless you want to lose, which is, I don't want to lose. So there's a level of like ruthlessness that comes out here. And I tend to agree with it. It is a competition. Nobody entered business to lose money. It is a competition. There's money that's being spent, or there's investments that are being made. They will either go to your company and your employers or employees and your families, or they will go to your competitors' employees and their families. It's a cut and dry reality that someone will win and someone will lose. I would rather win. And I think Johnny Rockefeller is just encouraging us to accept that. And obviously it sucks. Like, I mean, there's a level of compassion that's involved, but sometimes you have to subdue that. Okay, this note is good. This says environment. The people who can get ahead in this world are those who know how to find their ideal environment. If they cannot do it, they will create it themselves. Bam! This reminds me of an idea. I can't remember where I saw it. Create an environment that makes good decisions for you. I'm a firm believer in this. I think that we are very adaptive creatures, humans. We are probably the most adaptable species that's ever lived. I think we are. That's why we're so successful as a species. We have the ability to adapt to an environment like no other. That being said, we can also create an environment that will result in our adaptation. So we don't have, let's use a deer, for example. A deer can't control its environment. It can't adapt, or it can't create an environment. Beavers, actually, funny enough, I believe beavers, other than human beings, are the second most powerful creatures in terms of adapting or creating their environment. They can change entire ecosystems of areas with their dams and things. Just a funny little side note. But nonetheless, we can either adapt to our environment, or if we figure out and we learn about ourselves, we learn about our temperamental tendencies and our patterns and our habits and what makes us tick and what we are interested in and what we love to do, etc., what gets us fired up and going, then we can create an environment that allows us to do those things, and then we'll win. It's that simple. It reminds me of another quote, which I'll probably say 100,000 times before I'm dead. Sam Zell said, I'm actually going to pull it up because it was so profound to me. Sam Zell is a famous investor, real estate investor. I think he died recently, but very intelligent guy, very, very wealthy. Sam Zell said, go for freedom. Freedom allows you to control what you work on. If you control what you work on, you'll work on what you love. If you love it, you'll do it for a long time. If you do it for a long time, you'll get really good at it. And if you get really good at it, money will come. One of my favorite quotes, and I honest to God think that John D. Rockefeller would agree with that. I think that he would encourage us to find what we love to do and then double down on it to the nth degree. I really do. So yeah, just create your environment. Either we'll find what's the best environment for us. That could be where you live, who you're surrounding yourself with, where you work, what you do for work, where you work out, how you work out, what hobbies you do, where you do your hobbies. All those things are our environment. We have the ability, the miraculous ability to control and create most of that. So we'd be fools not to, I think. But that also starts with a level of understanding of self, right? Like we can't just like mindlessly go into these things. You have to experiment to gather data. You have to be able to test things out, gather data, and then reincorporate the data that you've discovered. Okay, this says silence. Let's see. Dear John, I have noticed the news that accused me of being stingy, saying that I do not donate enough. It is nothing. I have been scolded enough by reporters who do not know me, and I am used to their ignorance and harshness. There is only one way to respond to them, to remain silent and unjustified, no matter how they verbally criticize me, because I know what I think. I firmly believe that I am on the right side. And the notes that I said are disturbed or disinterested, unbothered, and don't explain. Don't complain, don't explain. When he would just remain silent. There's a lot of power in silence. He wouldn't even acknowledge that these people are saying negative things about him because he believes so firmly in what he was doing, and he believes so firmly in his own moral compass. Warren Buffett would call it like internal scoreboard versus external scoreboard. If we have an internal scoreboard that we're clear on, values, principles, things that we want to live by, then it literally matters zero, matters not at all what an external scoreboard says. It doesn't matter what these reporters are saying about you. It literally does not mean anything if we believe that what we're doing is good and we're doing our best at it and we can go to sleep at night. So unjustified. Don't have to explain. Silence can sometimes and often is strength. Okay, this is a good one. This says dignity. In my opinion, donating money is a wrong kind of help. It will make a person lose the motivation to be thrifty and diligent and become lazy, unpredictable, and unaccountable. More importantly, when you give alms to a person, you deny his dignity. And if you deny his dignity, you take away his destiny, which is extremely immoral in my opinion. Wow. As a rich man, I have the responsibility to be a messenger for the benefit of mankind, but I cannot be the initiator of making people lazy. Wealth and happiness can only be attained by work. The habit of eating lunch for nothing will not help a person progress, but only make him lose the chance to win. But hard work is the only reliable way out. Work is the price we pay for enjoying success. Guys, that's pretty legit. I love what he said about dignity and destiny. More importantly, when you give alms to a person, you deny his dignity. And if you deny his dignity, you take away his destiny. This is an important instance. I'm going to look up the definition of dignity because I think that's really crucial to understand what he's talking about here. It's one of those words that I think we just throw around. It's very pervasive, but nobody actually knows what it means. Dignity is the state or quality of being worthy of honor or respect. A sense of pride in oneself, self-respect. Okay, so yeah, if you give somebody alms, if you give them unlimited gifts and make them lazy, you take away their self-respect. And without self-respect, it's very easy to see that nothing good can happen. You have to respect yourself. You have to believe in yourself to be able to accomplish things. And when somebody is given everything, that's why there's no self-respect there. Interesting dichotomy. It's also funny. I mean, he's literally the richest person in the world. He's giving away I would assume millions and millions of dollars. He had the biggest business in the world and the biggest charitable foundation in the world at the same time. So I don't know who these reporters are. It sounds pretty hypocritical because if you want to give away more money, how about you make more money, reporters, and give it away yourself? It's kind of a Marxist perspective, if you ask me, and I don't really like it. Okay. Oh, this is interesting too, because this was kind of convicting for me, to be honest with you. Okay, the note says action. Son, I know that you are an outstanding graduate of Brown University and your knowledge of economics and sociology is excellent. However, you should be clear that knowledge is originally empty, and unless knowledge is put into action, nothing will happen. Moreover, the knowledge in the textbooks is almost all compiled by writers with theoretical knowledge, hence, it is difficult to use it to help you solve practical problems. I hope you can get rid of your dependence on knowledge and learning. This is the key to your smooth journey in life. You need to know that learning itself is not very good. Learning must be used to make it work. To become a person who can use what you have learned, you must first become a person with practical ability. So, where does the ability come from? The ability to practice come from? In my opinion, it is hidden in hardship. My experience tells me that walking a difficult road, a road full of hardships, misfortunes, failures, and difficulties, will not only build our strong character, but also the ability to implement great things that we rely on. Will come into being. Those who climb out of the midst of suffering know what it means to find ways and means to save themselves. To endure hardship deliberately is one of my beliefs of success. Maybe you might ridicule me, thinking that there is nothing more stupid than trying to experience hardship deliberately. No! There's that exclamation point. People who have no experience with misfortune are unfortunate. A lot of things come and go quickly. Those who have realized their dreams of becoming famous overnight and getting rich overnight, which one of them did not disappear without a trace all of a sudden? There, it goes back to putting ourselves up against that wall and doing hard things and creating the intensity and urgency for ourselves. People who have no experience with misfortune are unfortunate. That's pretty profound. The reason it was convicting is because obviously I'm reading. I like reading a lot, and I think that's a fantastic thing to do. Obviously, I'm doing a podcast on it, or a podcast on books and learning continuously. And it really just made me ask myself, okay, well, am I reading for the sake of learning? Like, what's the sake of learning all this? If I'm not applying these things to my life, then what I'm doing is literally wasting the gift of life that God has given me. If I'm just reading pages of a book and reading words on a page and not doing anything with them, it's as good as me not doing anything. It's as good as me going to eat Cheetos off my stomach and watch reality TV. It literally means nothing. Why would I learn this stuff if I'm not going to apply it? It literally means nothing if we do not apply knowledge. It was convicting to me to make sure that, I'm not just reading these and that you're not listening to these just for the sake of listening to these. Apply the lessons from these people into your life, and then it becomes practical knowledge and will produce fruit in our lives. People without knowledge are ultimately useless, but those with knowledge are likely to become slaves of knowledge. Everyone needs to know that all knowledge will be transferred into preconceived notions and that the result will be one-sided conservative psychology, thinking that I understand, and society is like this. With the prejudice of understanding, there will be a lack of interest in knowing, and if there is no interest, it will lose the motivation to move forward, and only boredom is left waiting. Therefore, not understanding will lead to success. Interesting paradigm there. Not understanding will lead to success. It's that genuine curiosity to learn and to know and to actually understand that will lead to success. Something we could all learn from. Just a lot of notes about hard work. This guy literally would not stop talking about hard work being the producer of all good things. And I think that's, if he's going to mention it a bunch of times, it'd be good to take note of it. Okay. This is excuses. In my opinion, excuses is a mental illness, and people with this serious illness are all losers without exception. Of course, most people also have some mild symptoms. However, the more successful a person is, the less excuses he will find. The biggest difference between those who are prospering everywhere and those who do nothing is excuses. I despise those who are good at making excuses because it is the behavior of the weak. This is an interesting one. So, like, something I've thought about for work. Okay, what if I have a legitimate excuse, or if I'm late for something, or if I don't do something, or I miss a meeting, or whatever it is? If I have a legitimate excuse, I could say, oh, I didn't, sorry, my dog ate my homework, which actually happened to me one time. I made a cookie cake cell for biology in 9th grade, and my dog literally went up on the counter and ate it. So it's kind of a funny joke, like, your dog ate your homework. It literally did, but in the end of the day, this is a funny example, but I could have just put it higher. I could have protected it or whatever. If you're late to a meeting, oh, there's traffic. Okay, well, the reality is that you didn't plan for it. Like, you could have showed up early. You could have left earlier. Oh, I didn't get my project done. I didn't get that thing done at work. Okay, well, why? Okay, well, you didn't prioritize it and you didn't do what you needed to do. It's even if we have, quote, legitimate excuses to the masses, it really doesn't matter. It's really a matter of getting things done properly or not. So he hates excuses, and I'm trying to cull those out of my life as much as possible as well. Let's see. I mean, there's so many notes. It's crazy. Okay. This says big goals. The achievements that Ford created proved one of my life. He's talking about Henry Ford. Proved one of my life credos. Wealth is proportional to goals. If you have ambitions and big goals, your mountain of wealth will rise to the sky. If you just want to pass by, then you will end up in the rat race or even nothing. Even if the wealth is close to you, you will only get a little bit of it. But I think the goal must be great, because if you want to be successful, there must be stimulation. A great goal can enable you to exert all your strength, and there will be stimulation. Losing the excitement means that there is no strong force to push you forward. I often remind myself to not make any small plans because it cannot inspire the soul. So that's an example of like what are we actually aiming for? If we're aiming for the stars, then I mean it's that old cliche thing, like if you shoot for the stars, you'll land on the moon or whatever it is. Also, back to his planning and strategy, we have to know what we want. And if you want a mediocre thing, you'll have a mediocre outcome. It's just the reality of it. If you want a big thing or a great thing or an influential thing or a lot of money or whatever it is for you, then you'll do what you need to do it because it's stimulating. It's not stimulating to have a goal that's not like out of reach. You don't have the proper stimulation. So we have to have big goals. This is he's just good at writing. This is a funny little quippy thing. The note is invest. In my eyes, money is like dung. If you scatter it around, you can do a lot of things. But if you hide it, it will be just an unbearable foul-smelling asset. So money is like dung. You don't really hear money compared to poop very often, but it makes a lot of sense. If you scatter it, money is meant to be circulated. If you circulate it and you invest it, it will come. If you hoard it, the old abundance versus scarcity mindset, if you hoard money and you act as if it's very, very hard to come to you and that you have to hold on to it very tight, you will gain nothing. It will just start to smell and your life will become ruinous because you've loved money, which is not a good thing to do in my opinion. All right, I don't know what this says, so I'm going to move on. Know yourself. That's the note here. Know yourself. However, most people interpret it as just knowing the negative side of themselves. Most self-assessments include too many shortcomings, mistakes, and incompetence. It is good to recognize your own shortcomings, and you can use this to seek improvement. However, if we only recognize the negative side of ourselves, we will fall into chaos and make ourselves worthless. Bam! We will all be treated like what we think we are. Those who think that they are a bit worse than others, no matter what their actual ability is, will definitely be a bit worse than others because the mind itself can regulate and control various actions. If a person feels that he is inferior to others, he will show true actions that are inferior to others. And this feeling cannot be hidden or concealed. Those who think they are not very important will eventually become not very important people. I'm going to read that again. Those who think they are not very important will eventually become not very important people. We will be treated like we think we are. On the other hand, those who believe that they have the capability of taking heavy responsibilities will become a very important person. Therefore, if you want to be an important person, you must first make yourself believe that I am really important. That's awesome. Because this is another thing about the self-belief. It's crucial. Those who think that they are a bit worse than others, no matter what their actual abilities is, will definitely be a bit worse than others. And the other thing about the most self-assessments, people say, oh, be honest, reflective, whatever. And it goes back to the humility thing. It's a lot of times I really do believe it's not humility, it's weakness and fear. Because if I tell myself, oh, I'm not capable of doing that, or this podcast can't grow that, or this podcast can't do that, or this business can't do that, because I don't have this, or I'm not skilled enough here, or I'm not courageous enough, or whatever. What it is it's a justification for me not to take action. And like we talked about, taking action leaves us vulnerable to potential failure. So it's like this weird roundabout 40 chess way our mind plays games on us to not take action. Because, I tell myself I'm less than. Okay, well, then I'm going to act like I'm less than. And then if I act like I'm less than, I don't have to be exposed to the potential failure of taking big action. I think that might be one of the most important things in the entire book, that paragraph right there. Okay, this says brave. John, think about the lucky guys you know. You can almost be sure that they are not gentle, courteous, and frugal people, and can almost be certain that they always exude the brilliance of self-confidence and the attitude of everything, and even appear very bold. There is a problem of chicken and egg. Is it because of luck that the lucky ones show confidence and boldness, or is their luck the result of self-confidence and boldness? My answer is the latter. The God of luck favors the brave is a motto that I have respected throughout my life. Victory does not necessarily belong to the strong. People who are highly vigilant, energetic, brave, and fearless will also win. I have never seen people who do not appreciate confident and decisive people. Everyone is a supporter of confident and decisive people. We expect such people to be leaders. The reason why we are attracted to them is that they are very attractive. Therefore, brave people are often more successful, and it is easier for them to take on roles as leaders, presidents, and commanders. Those who are promoted quickly belong to this land of person. Experience tells me that people who are bold and decisive can complete the best deal, attract the support of others, and form the most powerful alliance. Those who are timid and hesitant can hardly reap such benefits. Not only that, bold methods are also beneficial to them. People with confidence will turn their expectations into success. They will design all plans to pursue success in accordance with their expectations. So, that's awesome. Brave people. God favors the brave. Fortune favors the brave. You've heard that. But like God 100% favors the brave, because bravery is a sign of faith. You cannot have bravery without faith. It's the whole point. It's taking the leap of faith off the cliff bravely, knowing that God's going to catch you, knowing that your life will be fruitful, that the jump will be fruitful, that you'll figure out a way to fly. We have to be bold. We have to be confident. We have to be decisive too. I love that. People that make decisions quickly are attractive. I like this too. The reason why we are attracted to them is that they are very attractive. I love that. Everyone is a supporter of confident and decisive people. So, that's just a question for you. I don't know if I can really answer that for any of us, but how can we become more decisive? Maybe it's even as simple as at a restaurant. Instead of looking over a bunch of things, making a decision quickly. Your girlfriend or your wife asks you, where do you want to go to dinner? Decision quickly. What are you going to get for lunch today? Decision quickly. What are you going to wear? Decision quickly. I think that's how we can build up that muscle to be able to make decisive business decisions. I was actually on a call recently with a friend of mine about business, and I loved it. He literally, on the call, he's like, you know what? Yeah, let's just do it. Yeah, let's go. Go ahead. He thought about it. He made sure it was a good decision, but he didn't spend too much time deliberating on the idea. There's obviously a little bit of prudence that needs to go into it, but I respect, just like Johnny Rockefeller said, I respect and am attracted to the person that's bold and decisive. I think we all are, and I think we can all become more of that. Okay, this just says friends. But some people are obviously not worth associating with. For example, those who are petty and trivial. Since I was young, I have refused to associate with two kinds of people. The first type is those who completely surrender and are contented with the status quo. They are convinced that they are inadequate and believe that creative achievements are only the patent that belongs to the lucky ones. This kind of person is willing to guard a very secure but ordinary position year after year in a muddle-headed manner. They also know that they need a more challenging job in order to continue to develop and grow, but because of countless resistances, they are convinced that they are not suitable for doing big things. A wise man will never sit down and mourn over fate. The second type of person are people who cannot complete challenges. There you go. It's that simple. First type of person is people who are completely surrendered and contented with the status quo. The second type of person that he does not associate with are people who cannot complete challenges. The reason I wrote friends there, who are we hanging out with? Who are we around? Are you with people that are on the same direction as you, or that are walking on the same path? Are we with people that are building businesses, that are taking risks, that are becoming stronger, better versions of themselves? Or are we with shithead friends from high school just because they're our shithead friends from high school, that drink every weekend, that do drugs, that gamble profusely and addictively, that are playing video games excessively, that are watching porn excessively, that are extremely frivolous and I learned this word recently, and live life with levity, which is like a lack of seriousness. I understand now, as I just said that, I'm contradicting what I said earlier. I need to be better. But nonetheless, it's these, are we friends with these people just because we're friends with them? I understand the idea of loyalty, but your life is your life. Like, our lives are our lives. Who we spend time with absolutely 100% certainly impacts who we become. I've become actually a lot better in my life of disassociating with people that are just simply not on the same path as me. Doesn't mean I can't love them. Doesn't mean I can't be compassionate and empathetic towards them. But it does mean that I understand where I'm going and where I want to go, and that they're not on the same path. Maybe one day they will. I think that's a really important question for us to ask ourselves. Who are we hanging out with? Who should we not be hanging out with? And why? You know, it's a hard question to answer, but I think a lot of us could benefit from that. Let's see. Oh, this is good. This says, do what you love. So I mentioned this earlier. John, receiving your letter is very exciting to me because you understand my philosophy, which always helps me succeed in my career. Do what you like to do and leave others to the people who like to do it. It's that simple. Do what you like to do and leave others to do what they like to do. This is like the whole idea of grind culture, where it's like, oh, you got to grind, put your head down for 20 years and do some monotonous job and blah, 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 blah. I think that's chicken crap. I actually do. Here is John D. Rockefeller, the most successful American businessman, once again telling you to do what you like to do and leave other things to the people who like to do it. That doesn't mean shirk responsibilities or dispel responsibilities or duties, but he is telling us to do what we like to do, find our interests. Back to that Sam Zell quote. What do you like to do? What do you love to do? Follow your interests. Because if you do what you like to do, you'll do it for a long time. And if you do it for a long time, we will be exceedingly good at it. So I just find that to be very interesting as a leader, as an employer. Okay, well, I like to do X, Y, and Z. Who am I gonna partner with in business? Would I partner in business with somebody who likes to do the exact same things as me? No, that's a retarded idea. Why would you do that? What you should do, we would all be better to do, is hire people who like to do the things that we don't want to do. It's complementary. It's like the parts of the sum of the two are greater than the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, if that makes sense. So or however that saying goes, I don't know. But I think this is a really profound idea, to follow your interest and do what you like to do. Leave other things to the people who like to do them. Here's one that says hope. You have to be a hopeful person. No matter how bad the situation looks or how bad it actually is, please keep your eyes open to find the infinite hope in it. Never give up searching, because hope will always exist. My favorite book of all time is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. The Count of Monte Cristo, at the back end of the book, says one of my favorite lines in any piece of literature ever. He says something like, all human wisdom is found in these two words, wait and hope. If we believe that there is hope, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, human mind we can do extremely incredible things. There's a study that I remember where they put rats in a bucket of water and they made them tread water until they drowned. And right as they were drowning, they picked them up out of the water. And I think I'm going to butcher it, but maybe they did like 15 or 20 minutes, something like that. And then they put them back in the water like a pretty short period of time later. And they tread water for hours because they knew, the original, I don't know when this is going to end. But then they were saved. And then they had this idea, oh, wait, I just have to keep doing this. At some point, I'm going to get saved. That's what hope is. That's the hope. And we can't lose sight of that. I believe it's a choice to be a hopeful person. And Johnny Rockefeller encourages us to be that type of person. This is an interesting philosophy in interacting with people. In my opinion, everyone aspires to be considered valuable, valued, and respected by others. There is an invisible sign of hanging on everyone's forehead which says, value me. Something we should all learn from in dealing with people. There's a great book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think is really valuable, but it's that similar idea. How do you make people feel important? Because people love to feel important. Remembering names, I think, is a really good way to do it. It's a very small thing to do. You are good at remembering names if you tell yourself you're good at remembering names. One way to do that is just say it 2 or 3 times real quick after they say it. Hey, great to meet you. What's your name? Nolan. Oh, right on, Nolan. You said maybe say it back to him as well as something I'll do. Like, okay, nice to meet you, John. Where are you from? Great. Oh, John. So what's saying it multiple times in the first part of the conversation has helped me remember names quicker and more effectively. And I really do believe that's a really good way to make people think that they're valued. Very low-hanging fruit, something we could all do. Okay, we're approaching the end here. This is the last one. And I think this is perfect because it's in the ethos of these new podcasts. Johnny Rockefeller said, a great book is a great tree of wisdom, a great tree of mind in which we will be reshaped. Let us learn to be smart and humble and smart. A great book is a great tree of wisdom. So that to me, it's the second. There's 2 books that I've read so far: The Rise of Teddy Roosevelt and John D. Rockefeller. Those are 2 of the most prominent American men to ever live, and both of them speak about how important reading stories and learning from people are. Both of them, and they're not the only 2. Literally, 99.999% of the greatest men that have ever lived were highly interested in the stories of people that came before them and learning from them and reading books and gathering information that can be applied to their lives. I think that's a great way to leave it. I really encourage you to get this book. As you can see, if you're watching, I have a ton of notes. It's very short, very easy to read. Like I said, he's a very simple way of writing, very entertaining way of writing too. He's pretty funny, to be honest with you. But yeah, I hope you learned something. If you did, let me know what. There's going to be a link in the show notes that you can purchase this book with an affiliate code to Amazon. It's the same price for you, but it gives me a little bit of a kickback, so you can support the show at the same time. With that said, adios.